First of all, I want to thank everyone for coming. My name is Chris Macdonald-Dennis. For those of you who don't know me, I think everyone does. And thank you for coming to this class on salvation. Just to tell you, because this is my style, it isn't going to be a class, it's going to be us talking about it. I will share some of the more traditional Christian thoughts about what salvation is and sin and being saved and stuff, but as I've learned from this church, none of us agree, and that's one of the things that I love about this church. So I think the first thing I would like to do is to ask everyone to introduce themselves and say, who is Jesus to you? What does he represent? So actually I'm going to, as we were saying before, we're going to maybe bring the theology back into it. So if you would like to start, Joanne?
Sure. Yes, I'm Joanne, and I think of Jesus primarily as a revolutionary person, challenging the systems and asking people to be more generous in spirit.
I'm Dale Stickford, and I pretty much go along with what Joanne said. I think more and more I think of Jesus as a person and a leader, and both socially and as a role model for us, without the emphasis on dying to earn us something. This is a great plan, God's plan, that this needed to happen to grant us the reward of heaven.
I'm Andy. I think of Jesus as a teacher and a prophet.
I'm Kim, and a lot like Andy, I see him as a teacher and a prophet. I kind of put him in the same category with Buddha and some of those people, because,
I'm Anne, and I think of him as a teacher and, as somebody said, a role model.
I'm Larissa. This is a hard question. I think a lot of what people have said I agree with. For me, I guess, I've always thought that Jesus was so enlightened, and he was trying to share that with people who were just not there yet. And because when I read a lot of what he says, it's so past anything that the disciples were even getting from it. Like, big, huge, yeah.
And my name is Chris. I'm actually going to bring in the theology. I believe that Jesus was the manifestation of God on earth. I believe that he has been the closest thing to God on earth. Son of God, I'm not sure. I know that I have a lot of baggage around what that means around the virgin birth or things like that. But I do believe that he was the manifestation of God on earth. And like I said, the closest thing. But through doing all these things that you all talked about. So I think the first thing that I'd like to ask is, brainstorm, what are words, when you think of the word salvation, what do you think of? What are words or images that come to mind?
Hell and damnation.
Mm-hmm.
Forgiveness.
redemption.
Being clean. Watch your stance.
Heaven, eternal life.
That's a word I just kind of skip over. I don't
Yes.
think about it very much.
Yeah, that's, as Marcus Bohr said, salvation is one of those loaded words, and yet it is utterly central to the Christian vocabulary. I think sin is another word that we like to just kind of go over. For me, to be perfectly transparent, I've actually learned how to reframe these terms to actually claim them again. Because what I've been learning is that those terms are important, and they've been misused and misrepresented, but actually salvation can be a way, and actually sin can also be a helpful way of thinking about it. But I think that the way that we've been doing it, it's been a hammer to think about hell and damnation rather than what it, I will talk about what I think it should be. So what are other things that people think of with salvation?
Opportunity.
Ooh. Opportunity for?
A different life. I think for me, I think of more of Jesus' life being about how to live on earth. And so I think all of us have gone through those periods where we feel we've been saved or we've been lifted up.
Right, right. And that's actually one of the points that I will make, that I think that oftentimes salvation has been used to talk about the afterlife, but actually how I read the Gospels is that Jesus really was talking about the here and now. He never really talked about the afterlife. It was about, it's like the Lord's Prayer, on earth as it is in heaven. It's like that's actually the purpose. Because also for him as a Jew, that is what Jews, having practiced Judaism, that's what Jews focus on. Because Jews have so many different opinions about what the afterlife is. It's like, don't focus on that, because we don't ultimately know what will happen. It's this life that we're supposed to be doing. Where did we learn these things? So like hell and damnation, what'd you say?
Sunday.
Sunday school, okay. Glad I didn't go to your Sunday school. I was raised Methodist. Methodists were very nice. We kind of skipped over that too. Sunday school, was anyone raised with the concept of being saved?
I'm raising my hand.
Okay, what were you being saved from?
Oh God, it's that, and that's why I had a hard time coming into this. So it's nice to hear all these things again, and without bitterness attached to them. I grew up really religious, right? And you were supposed to be saved. You were going to hell because we are all sinners. In this, everyone on the planet is going to hell except for a small group of people.
Right.
And yeah, salvation was drummed into you at church and Sunday school, at youth group, at church camp, and you needed to invite Jesus into your heart. And I'm not sure where they got that phrase, but yeah. So
again, this has been a battering ram.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that theologians, and Marcus Borg is great as a theologian talking about this, about really kind of reclaiming and thinking about it in a very different way, that salvation really is, he says it, and I think it goes with what Joanne said, about a transformation. Do you have a transformed life? Is it ultimately Jesus? So for me, Jesus was the way. Jesus showed the way that we should live on earth. And so it does offer us a different life.
Wasn't that a term that was used by the early church?
Yes, exactly. They called it the way. So one of the things that's very interesting is that when you look at the early church, a lot of times they got it much more than after centuries of people. It's almost like they thought too much about it. It's like they thought way too much, or they just, and it really was about their own stuff. And one of the reasons I wanted us to get this out is that, when I read about Augustine and I read all these people, and their life, you're like, oh, this was your stuff. This was your stuff coming out. And for me, I would much rather us get this out on the table and say, I'm going to have a visceral reaction to that term salvation. Be like, okay. Because too often, we try to say this is the way it is, but it's really about us living through our own mishigas, as we would say in Yiddish.
Chris,
Yes.
I'd like to go back to Jesus, and I heard at a Lutheran church up by our cabin, the minister used the term bridge, which I thought was really positive in the sense of, if you think about how do we talk to God, how do we know what's best on earth.
Right.
And so I really like that.
Like a bridge to go, I think that's probably similar to what I would say, and actually, I like that.
Yeah, I really like that. That was,
A bridge to God. So I did look up online, I looked up 3 definitions of salvation. They were deliverance, and these were all non-theological, they were secular dictionaries. One was deliverance from sin and its consequences, deliverance from the power and effects of sin, and deliverance from destruction, difficulty, or evil. So, what do they all have in common? Clearly the word deliverance. It's something is delivering us. Yes, delivering from bad things.
The 2 of them use the word sin, which is a religious concept.
Exactly. Well, let's go to the S word. What? What were you
I
going to
was just
say?
thinking, as brought up as a Lutheran, the first 2 definitions were close, but there is quite a difference. Deliverance from sin or deliverance from the effects of sin. I mean, as Lutherans, kind of believed you're always a sinner.
Right, right,
And so salvation was deliverance from the power of
right.
your sin. We never got delivered from sin.
Right. And you know, as we talk about sin, and I tell you how I understand, I actually believe that we are all sinners, that we can't, that
Yeah.
it is a term that I will use, it's the human predicament. That as a classmate of mine said, human beings are going to screw up over and over and over again. And it's not about us as people, we're just human. It's our reptilian little mammal brain where the aggression, all that nasty stuff comes out. We do stupid things. My professor actually, who was teaching this class, said, think about how many times you lie a day. Like little lies. How many of them called white lies? You know, you tell someone something looks good, or a lie of omission, and you know, we're all thinking in class, we're like, yeah, we kind of do. And you don't even think about it, because you justify it in your mind, but when we're thinking about how often we do really stupid things. So, again, with the kind of putting things on the table, so if it's delivering us from sin, what is sin?
I grew up Lutheran with a Baptist father, so
Okay.
that explains that one. Every day he told me how to go on those. So I really don't like the word. However, the way I deal with it is, I really think God made us, if we believe in God, in a perfect image, and so I think of sin as being separated from your best self.
Say it again, separate.
Separated from your best self.
I like that, separated from the best self.
One of the few and main things I remember from 4 long years of seminary training was sin. I like to sin as a separation from self, from others, from God. Or it involves things that separate from.
Self, others. I like that way of thinking about it, separating. Can we ever be our best self, though? I think we can have glimpses. I think we can be our best self at moments, but I don't know that it's sustainable. Because I think there's so much pulling at us to do different things and to actually to go the easy way. A lot of times sin, you know, I think that so often we're raised with the idea of sin is like, it's this conscious thing. I think a lot of times it's just kind of going the easy way when you see something happens and you don't say anything and you're like, oh, I'm just going to kind of go along to get along. What are other ways that we can rethink the term sin? We're claiming the S word. I know that's difficult for a lot of people, and I own that is a really difficult thing because it has been used I think especially for those of us who are queer, you know, we were told we were sinful. I mean, that was a bad rumor, like we were bad people. But that also doesn't mean that I don't sin. So I actually heard someone differentiate between sins and sin. So sins are the things that like you weren't supposed to smoke or like do all those other things. And sin was just kind of what I like to say is the human predicament. What do you think I mean by the human predicament?
The idea that we're fallen because of that evil woman who listened to the serpent.
It
Watch
always goes
it.
back to the women. It always goes back to the women.
Yes. Well, you
Careful.
know, I would like to think that sexist understanding isn't necessarily true.
The serpent actually is the hero of that story.
But what it is,
You're editing our responses?
Whoa!
I'm just giving my perspective, yes. So fallen, we are fallen, we're flawed. That's another F word that I would use, that we're flawed people.
I think the problem really comes in, if you think about how you raise children, you want to tell them that they did wrong things or bad behaviors, and what's happened is sin has been wrapped up with shame.
Yes.
Yes.
And that we are basically bad with the opportunity to be good. And I think we live in a shameful culture.
Yes. I think bad behaviors versus shame.
And shame is so crippling. You can't even try to be your best self if you're ashamed of yourself. So.
Exactly. And the thing is, one of the things that I love, and that we'll talk about salvation, is that for me, that even though we do bad behavior, God still loves us anyway.